Part 10 of the Corvette build. We're getting really close to putting her back together for the last time. We're gonna get some interior put in it. Start installing some of the chassis and some finishing touches on the chassis so we can put it back under the car. Let's get started. I took the rear bumper support apart as much as I could to get as much weight off of it. And then I bolted it back into the rear bumper. You see, there's a lot of pieces of this thing that weighs a lot, so I shed a lot of weight. But this is just for mock-up, that way I don't have to try to hold so much weight up in the air on the car. So next I'll put that bumper up on the back of the car and we'll start working on getting the adapters made to put the 76 bumper onto a 73 chassis. First step is to make a plate to mount to the rear bumper support. This is one of the shims that came off of the 76, so I just traced it and cut it out. So I think this is a pretty common problem. The headlight assembly corrodes out because it's aluminum and they use steel bolts. So I'm gonna actually try to repair this. I'm gonna cut it out and I'm gonna try to weld in new aluminum. We'll see how this goes. All right, I cut out this section in here I used a cutoff wheel and die grinder, and then I cut another piece of aluminum, a new piece to fit in there, and I've clamped it with a piece of steel so I get the flat plane, and I'm going to try to weld the inside of this and then the outside of this. I did some practice with the spool gun. It's ugly, and it makes a mess, huge mess on the table, but I did figure some things out and I think we can be successful, so let's give it a shot. It's not great over here. This side actually did pretty well. It's kind of dirty in the two. It's hard to get everything clean. So now we'll take it apart, flip it over, and do the other side. So that worked out pretty well. You can barely see. Over here, there's still some corrosion over here outside of it, so it pitted. I could fill it in, but I don't think it matters. But it's nice and flat and filled in. I think I think I'll be able to successfully repair these. Considering I've never welded aluminum before, it didn't turn out too bad. That corner up here was really corroded and it didn't want to arc there very well, so we'll probably have to clean it up and spot weld that back in again. But all right, I'll clean her up. I cleaned up better than I thought it would. Kind of hard to see. Had a couple spots. I did forget, I have a crack on the inside there and one on the inside there that I need to fill up. And then I found a missed spot on the first one, so I'll go back, touch those up. I think it'll be a successful repair. Then we'll just have to put it up in the car and mark the holes so that I can drill the new mounting holes. Next, I had to figure out how to mark the holes, since the holes are up in that metal cross member in the nose. Well, there's this plate that goes in between the headlight assembly and that brace. So what I did was I took tape and made it double-sided, bolted this up in the car, stuck the tape to it, got the fixture up into the car using the front two holes, and then that stuck, unbolted it and took it out with it. And then I could come in here and mark the holes and center punch those using a transfer punch. And then just to make sure, at first I only had the 3 holes that hold the screws, but I took the other headlight assembly apart, and there's a 4th hole, and there's no threads in that hole up in the cross member, so it had to have been an alignment pin, I'm assuming, for assembly purposes. So I'm going to go ahead and add that hole also. These are all 1/2-inch holes as far as I can tell, and I have a second set of headlight assemblies, and they have 1/2-inch, well, the ones that are left have 1/2-inch holes as well. So we'll take that, we'll get these drilled, and then we'll move on to the second assembly. I finished repair on the headlight bracket assemblies, and I installed the DSE electric headlight conversion kit. So these assemblies are ready to go back in the car once I get to that point in the project. So I've been working on trying to figure out how to mount the seats and where to drill the holes. I came up with a cardboard template that I can set the seat in the car and I can transfer the holes over. But the rear hole, one of the rear holes is in this pocket. And I've been debating on putting a bar across here and leaving the pocket, drilling a hole in the bottom to put the hardware in. But I think I've come to the conclusion I'm just going to cut that out and I'm going to fill it in completely with a plate. I was worried about losing structure in the floor, but with like this divot here and these back here, and this is 16 gauge steel, I think it'll be fine. And if it does get flimsy, then I'll put a bar between the seat mount points underneath. That'll strengthen the floor up. So here's what I did to transfer the seat bolt pattern to the car. I took a piece of cardboard and I punched holes. They're not very clean, so I put tape over to make a cleaner hole. And then made sure that it stuck out far enough in the front that I could put tape, and that would allow me to tape it down to the floor. So then I could take the seat out and I could transfer the holes to the floor. So I got the body back on the chassis. That allows me to fit the lower shift boot to the shifter. So what I did is I measured the oval shape there at the base of the shifter, and I traced it on and cut it out on the shift boot. It turned out it fits pretty well. The boot fits nice and tight down around the metal base. Next, I will have to form the base of it to match the shape of the tunnel. It's metal encapsulated in rubber. There's a lip on the inside, and I'll have to cut the tunnel out to fit that lip. That'll help keep water and debris from getting up in the car. So I'm going to make a template, or I've made a template. I'll take the body back off the chassis, and I will attach the template, transfer it over, and then cut it out to fit. I got the motor back in the chassis. Decided to go ahead and plumb the power steering. I bought a kit from BRP Hot Rods, which gives you the fittings to fit pretty much any style power steering box. I use the ones for the Borgerson steering box, and they give you the elbows and they give you the hose. I went ahead and purchased a power steering cooler, and I plumbed it in as well. They give you a different fitting for the side of the power steering pump, which goes to a 6AN. That way you can use the 6AN lines with the hose. So I have some interference with the suspension with this new diff. The diff comes with a 6AN fitting in the vent, and as you can see, we're off by, I don't know, half an inch. So the Ritec suspension interferes with it. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna notch this, and then I have some pipe, and I'm gonna weld half a piece of pipe in there about halfway through. And then just to be sure, I think I'll probably weld another brace in here just to make sure that that's not too weak. Here's what we're gonna try. Got the hole saw set up. This is bolted down. This is sturdy, so I'm hoping that'll be enough to allow this to punch straight through. I didn't realize how thick this tubing was. It looks to be about 3/16. It makes sense. So instead of using that pipe I was going to use, turns out the slug actually fits in here pretty good. And then I can retain the same thickness. So I'm going to weld that in there, and then I'll grind the corners off to give it a little bit of clearance. But hopefully that'll be strong enough. All right, and there's the finish. It actually turned out really good. Just enough space, and it didn't take that much out of the bar. Since I took the original material and just flipped it around, all of the material's there, and I actually added some weld in the middle because it was still a little too deep. So I think it's going to be strong enough. I'm not going to add an extra brace. So we'll get her painted up and call it done. I got some more of the wiring done. I just have a couple more grounds to run under the dash. I went ahead and got started on the carpet. I purchased this marine grade outdoor carpet from Menards. It actually resembles the factory stuff pretty well. So what I did is I laid the entire piece down inside the car, and I weighted it down with the I-beam and other weights. And I went in and I trimmed it until it would fit. So I made the cuts. It worked pretty well. And then I also got Loctite spray adhesive. This is the mid lightweight stuff. It's repositionable. I wanted to have the ability to move it around if I needed to. It also says if you spray more, put a heavier coat, that it'll make it a more permanent application. So we'll see how it holds up and go back and spray more if we have to. I also cut the holes in and got some of the belts bolted into the car. So the center console out of the 76 was broke, like most of them are. It was broke in all four corners. So last night I epoxied them, and that actually turned out pretty good. It's pretty solid now. So also the lower two bolts to mount the plate were broken off, and they sell a kit to fix this. It's like 40 bucks, but I just bimped up metal and made the pieces myself. So I'll epoxy those in place. So I'll rough up this area, and I've already roughed up this area, and we'll epoxy it down, and I think that's going to work just fine. The front two holes aren't broken, so I left them alone. Alright, so we got them epoxied in place. I screwed the plate down, put the epoxy, I put a piece of metal underneath, and clamped it in place. So we'll let that cure and see how it turns out. Look, the chassis is fully disassembled again. Guess what? Had to take it back to the body shop, didn't get it right. This time all of the mounting points should be within 1/8 of the factory specs, so we should be good. So you got suspension, motor, stuff laying everywhere. Look at this mess. So I figured while the chassis was apart, let's go ahead and box in the frame horns and do all the gusseting that Chevy PowerBook says you should do. You know, just you'd make templates and then cut them out to fit. Can't remember which way that one goes. That one goes over here. And then cut the pieces out of the metal, weld them in. So still working on that, but look at this mess. It's crazy how much of a mess it makes when you're grinding metal. Anyways, we'll get it done. I see multiple comments about boxing into this frame horn and it interfering with the outlet of the radiator. I don't know if it's going to be a problem with this build. The LS swap radiator from DeWitt's, the outlet's actually quite a bit, it's higher. The factory one is down here, pretty close to the bottom. So it may not interfere. We'll have to see when we get it back together. If it does, we'll cut it out, make it fit. Finally, the drive shaft showed up. So we have the final component to put in along with the differential. I bought this differential from Duntov. It's got 370 gear. It's got the HD axles. And I also had all the fittings put in it so I can run the diff cooler. I also made the harness bar for the car. I didn't get any of that on video. I was having some audio video issues, but that's been resolved. So I'll put some pictures up here to show you how I made that. It bolts in into the bird cage. I also got the headlight assemblies put together. The Dakota Digital gauges installed in the panels. We'll get those back in the car once the body goes back on the chassis for the last time. Okay, we've got a lot done in this part. See a good amount of the interiors. It's gonna have to come back out to finish adjusting the belts because I can't adjust the main part of the belt with the seats in the car, but that's not too hard to do. The harness bar plus a whole bunch of chassis work. So in the next video, we should be putting this chassis back under the car for the last time. Thanks for watching.